Amy Britton Hayden, and I am the Homeless Programs Administrator for the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, State of West Virginia. Yes, very long.
Homeless and economic opportunity. I guess
Yeah,
that makes sense.
well,
Yeah.
yes, sort of.
Yeah, 'cause we all need economic opportunities, particularly if we don't have a place to live.
Exactly.
And I mentioned earlier, but kind of homeless. I mean, what do you call the other? What is the federal program called? Emergency.
The emergency shelter grants.
Yeah. So
Yes.
that's what you use. That's the money used for homeless.
Yes.
And who are the typical homeless people?
Well, I don't really think there are any
all kinds.
typical homeless. We have in some of the rural areas, we have families that are homeless.
How? How does that happen?
Well, in West Virginia, we have a cultural thing, I guess, where families double up, where people live with their parents and then they have their own kids, and then and that goes on for generation to generation. But sometimes people don't want to live with their parents, or they feel like exactly. I don't want to live with my parents.
Yeah.
And then something happens, the parents split up, or
I see.
The house is foreclosed on, and then we have families that end up homeless. Let's see, in the Eastern Panhandle part of the state, closer to D.C., we have quite a few veterans.
Oh, really?
Yes. And they come from all over for the VA hospital that's in Martinsburg.
That's there, yeah.
So we have that as well. And then here in Charleston, and also in Huntington, which is about an hour away, we do have a lot of men, single men, who are homeless. Mm-hmm. And then also victims of domestic violence.
I see. And so you handle those constituents, all of them, whether it's domestic violence or homeless veterans or families that are stuck or whatever.
Right.
But, I mean, is there a number of families? I mean, this is...
I don't know the actual numbers for this year, but there are quite a few families, and especially if you consider single-parent households as families. So, they're technically still a family. And,
right. I think the image we have is the old bum we think of, or something like some guy who doesn't want to do anything and he's homeless.
And that's completely not it. There are a lot of gentlemen at our homeless shelter here in Charleston who do have jobs, but they don't make enough money to, and especially now to even afford gas or a car. So when they couldn't afford an apartment 2 years ago, they're definitely not going to be able to afford it now.
So how do you find if you're maybe get foreclosed or a situation happens where you're thrown out of your apartment, you may not have a place to live? Mm-hmm. How do you find the agencies in the state to help you?
Well, I think it's easy, but maybe it's not so easy. It's more of, I hate to think of it this way, but more like a Hansel and Gretel with the breadcrumb. You've got to start with the right place that then gives you the referral to the next right place. And it really is trying to decide what it is that you need and who is it that offers those services. So it could be difficult for people. And a lot of times people aren't quite homeless yet.
Yes, right.
And they're trying to forgo that. And they don't think that perhaps a homeless shelter or a day shelter could help them with their rent or their utilities. So a lot of times there is that thought that maybe that's not the place for them because they aren't homeless. And so in fact, that might not be true.
There may be help if you're not homeless yet, you're not out yet, but you're having trouble paying your rent or utilities or whatever, that this same funding could help.
Absolutely. We do have some groups that use their money to fund transitional houses, but they also use it for emergency assistance.
I see.
To help people with utilities and with rent. And a lot of people may not realize that. Now, not all the shelters do, but some do.
Yeah. So this is your money goes to nonprofits in the community that help people with housing problems?
Yes, in the entire state. We fund 36 shelters and transitional homes. And some of those may have a subsection of that shelter where they do emergency service.
I see. And I would think with the foreclosed property issue and mortgage issue, you're going to be a busy lady.
Oh, yeah, probably so. I mean, if you really think of it, we've heard where, you're just 1 or 2 paychecks away from homeless. And,
that's really...
Yeah, it really is true.
I guess, if you're not homeless yet, don't worry about that. Homeless is such a derogatory name, at least in my mind. But boy, you're scraping by and something big tough happened. How do you get the public to think about finding you guys out?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and we run into that, I think, here a lot in West Virginia. People don't want to ask for help.
Yeah.
And maybe a cultural thing, again. People don't want to ask for help. And because it is derogatory. And I think we had this
you meet somebody at a cocktail party. Yes, I'm homeless.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when I go around somewhere, Arlie, my boss, tells them, "Oh, she's our homeless person."
I say, right.
So I guess since they're hanging out with me, but that it is taking that stigma away from needing help, because especially now in these times, times are tough. It's expensive
really
to eat.
Crisis in housing.
Absolutely.
As opposed to homeless. So if you have a crisis or potential crisis with your housing, maybe that's what, unfortunately, we've labeled it this thing, and that's what you're looking for.
And I think when we say homeless, it really is, people think they have to be on that lower than bottom rung before they come to ask for help. And that's not generally the way that I think we like to operate the programs here, or especially myself. A lot of the government programs are geared towards when somebody hits rock bottom, then there'll be some intervention, especially with utility bills. A lot of the federal programs, and even state programs, you have to wait until you have a cutoff notice before they'll intervene.
Oh, really? Huh?
Well, so by that time, we're already at crisis point. And, so I've really talked with some of our shelters and the emergency grants, people who do the emergency services, and say, you don't have to do that. It's your choice as a nonprofit to make that choice. But if you wait until it's a crisis and they have a $1,200 gas bill, and you can throw $50 or $100 at it, that's really not, it's not really helping somebody out. And, the stress that would be involved in waiting until you can actually get that help. So, in our Department of Health and Human Resources, when they go in to do any sort of emergency services, people would have to have a cutoff notice. So I think a lot of these programs have piggybacked on that idea, but it may not necessarily be the best thing.
So whether, we're talking people all over the country, so different states may be different.
Absolutely.
So you never know, or whatever, but I guess if you smell the problem coming, it sounds like you should start investigating.
Absolutely.
That's what it is.
Most people know, unless there has been something catastrophic that's just happened.
Today,
most people know when they get a $400 water bill, I don't have $400. So the best thing that I would tell clients when I saw that is, don't wait until the day before, or if somebody's knocking on your door to come in and then cut off your service is really not the best time to call.
The time is...
it's really just learning to be proactive.
But when you get the $400 bill and you can't pay it, because it's going to take 3 months for them to get you, right?
Oh, right.
And, and most of us will wait those 3 months and hope a white horse will come to the door, right? And it never does, and then we're really screwed. Right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So when you get that $400 bill and you can't pay it, that's when you should start seeking help.
Absolutely.
Not 90 days later.
Yeah, and the state of West Virginia has something that's really great. Online, it's 211, where you can go and you can search through
the agencies,
and you can narrow it down by keyword as far as what you're looking for.
Oh, that's wonderful. 211. Yeah, that's a national program. Every place doesn't have it, but
well, we finally do.
Exactly. Well,
and it'll at least help. And all it would take was one phone call. You get a hold of a case manager and just briefly explain what it is that you need. And once you get that ball rolling,
once you get the paper going,
exactly, you really can find what you need. But sometimes you do have to be a bit tenacious.
So has that population been increasing for you guys, or what's going on recently?
There's a slow but steady increase, yes. And we're seeing some younger people, which is really quite disheartening. We're
teens or 20s?
Late teens, early 20s.
Wow.
There's an issue of children aging out of the foster care system.
I see.
And they can opt to stay in the foster care system until 21. But some of them, after they've been in foster care and back and forth, at 18, they just want to cut the ties there. And that means they have nowhere to go. So they end up at the shelter.
Right.
And that is
a shelter, that's not a bad word, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? And there's so many that are so well run.
I know, I've seen them too. They're just wonderful.
You know, you just say shelter.
I know. And that's like, if you go on Craigslist trying to find a place to stay, they're going to be crappy places.
Exactly. Horrible landlords and rats. But no, you're not going to have that there.
Yeah.
They do serve meals, and the people that run them are great. Yeah. But how many people do you know want to go and stay in a room with 30 other guys?
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I don't. Yeah. I had roommates in college. But
there must be I don't know. It's just frustration. I mean, the stigma that we attach to so many names of programs. Or the other thing I think that people should realize that if you never see yourself homeless or whatever, to be aware of these kinds of things, because nowadays you're going to run into people with those kinds of issues.
Yeah.
And a good neighbor tells somebody where help is. Yeah.
Absolutely. And and I think we have a lot of that here.
Yeah.
Now there may be some people who can't get the foot in the door or don't know where to go, but the thing about West Virginia being so small and the communities being so tight-knit is I think a lot of people know, and they are going to do what they need to do to help their neighbor.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. So you get less of that in bigger cities.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure. But
I remember living in an apartment this far from somebody, 3 inches, with a million of us in this building. I didn't know anybody.
Oh, everybody knows everybody. Right. Yeah. So
that's it. Now, the other programs you're involved in are with the AIDS.
Yes. It's housing opportunities for people with AIDS. We have 2 grants that run pretty much concurrent. There's about a year overlap between each of them. They're 3-year grants. So one just started in...
so both are 3 years? You mean the homeless one?
No, the homeless is actually year to year.
I see.
We have 2 HOPWA grants, and they're each 3 years. HOPWA. Yes.
That's the AIDS grant?
That's the AIDS grant, yeah.
And that's from Housing and Urban Development?
Yes, it's a HUD grant. Yeah. And we've actually been a recipient of the HUD fund since 1994.
Wow.
Yes.
You don't look that old.
Yeah. Oh, well, I was actually involved with it back then. So, yes. And one of our sites that the HOPWA grants are used to provide housing and support services. Oh. Support services that can be linked to housing. Like utility assistance and a limited amount of health care, just a very small amount, but mostly, let's say if we're talking about credit counseling or daycare. And
transportation at all? Or?
A limited amount of transportation. The transportation, 2 of the sites have actually used other grants from Broadway Cares to do prepaid gas cards to get people back and forth to the doctor's office, and that's before gas hit $4 a gallon. So it was a great idea 5 years ago. It's an even better idea now.
But even so, they don't have all these other services. They may be aware of other organizations.
Oh, absolutely, and that's the key to running a good nonprofit and having good programs is to not duplicate what somebody else is already doing, because that's a waste of money. It really is. You need to know what's out there in your community and do a community needs assessment, and then say, wait, here's a hole and here's what we can do.
I see. Right.
So that's originally how the AIDS program started. Back in '89, there's a drop-in shelter here in Charleston that we're seeing so many guys coming through who are HIV positive and living on the streets.
Oh, wow.
And no one wanted to deal with it in 1989.
Right.
So this nonprofit bought a house and used it as a residential place. It was actually more of a hospice back then.
Right.
And then the HOPWA grant came along, and it turned out that there was this federal funding to do what this nonprofit had already been doing for 5 years. So my goodness, they jumped at the chance, and it's always been run through our office here. And there are 3 sites, one in Martinsburg, in Morgantown, one here in Charleston. And we're originally started as housing as sort of a hospice. It's now come to a long-term housing. So we see people living longer, and there are issues with that as well. Living longer also means meds for longer.
Right.
But we've seen a population grow and grow and grow, and until 2006, our money didn't grow with that. So we really had a limited amount to provide services to twice as many people as we had before. So we were able to get another grant.
Yeah. From the federal? What?
They're both, from the federal.
As you say, I'm thinking of, okay, AIDS patients, housing for AIDS patients. And I think, well, then why aren't there like housing for cancer patients?
Exactly. Well, that's a question that I've always had, and I guess perhaps when we started this,
so
there wasn't no one.
Shorter lives.
Yeah, exactly. And people with cancer, they were taken care of at home by their families. Yes. You'd have a young gentleman dying of AIDS, and a lot of times their family didn't want to have anything to do with them.
That's the issue. Yeah.
So, and that's how it started, and we still see a little bit of that, and there's still the stigma with HIV and AIDS, and especially in small communities, that there wouldn't be with cancer.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be wonderful to see equal amount given to other groups as well, and I think that's coming along. I know that the breast cancer awareness has come so far, and maybe they have piggybacked on the AIDS groups in the 80s who were very loud and vocal and got what they wanted. I mean, they were good at being right there in your face.
Absolutely.
Great organizers. We could learn something from them.
Absolutely. That's what it's about. So now you mentioned there's 3 sites here. That's in your county, in your state?
In the state. In the state. And each, the state's not that big. So each of those 3 groups are able to serve the entire state. We have one who covers 25 counties, another group that covers 22 counties, and then the other 9 counties are covered by the group in the Panhandle up near DC.
Now, does that mean these are facilities for people to live at, or just the grants are given out for other things in that area? Both. I see.
We have houses for people to come and live if they choose to do so. They each have their own bedroom, and then they share the common areas, the kitchens. So Charleston has 3 of those, Martinsburg has 1, and Morgantown has 1. But the biggest part of the program now is the rental assistance that is based with wherever that tenant is, and it's based on their income. The participant would pay 1/3 of their income, and then we could cover the rest. And with the second grant that we have now been able to expand that to do rents for a much longer period of time. It used to be that we could only really afford to do maybe 3 months, 4 months at the top, but we can actually take this into now we can take this into a long term, maybe up to a year. If let's say you've had someone come out of the hospital, they can't afford to go back to work. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, but they were going to end up homeless. We can help them get stabilized, and then they take up back in self-sufficiency where they were before. Now that's the goal, and there are people that meet that goal, and there are some that don't. We have to look at them as returning clients every year, but we are able to make a difference. So,
do they? I mean, I guess the offices, they're in the various 3 around the country. Do they really know about other government programs too, besides just the AIDS?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
So they learn to work the system.
These groups, the groups that I work with, they don't want to spend their money if somebody else is already doing it. Yeah, absolutely. We've always been big on that from the very beginning. Use what you have, but also use what somebody else has too. And the good thing is they've got great case managers there who will help the person instead of just handing them a piece of paper and sending them somewhere. They could go, wait, okay, here's what I'm going to do, and here's what you're going to do, and we're going to work this all together. And they really get that done, because sometimes, it's a big maze of where you have to go.
I mean, in 30 years, I still can't figure it out.
Let's not even get into the healthcare system, which has come so far for so many of our clients. But, they get that help there. And they're not just sent on packing. I mean, it really is a process. So, I'm
I mean, so many people, and we mentioned this, we just had lunch together.
We did.
I bought a bureaucrat lunch. You know, people think of the average government employee as being like that miserable woman at the Department of Motor Vehicles or something. You know, and when we see somebody like you know, obviously enjoys, you know, what they're doing.
Oh, I love what I do.
Really?
I do. I love what I do.
Why?
Oh my gosh. Well, you know, I've done the direct services, and I really, you know, I thought I made a difference there. But, you know, it's something that I started with because I really wanted to do it. I was a volunteer. I loved what I did, and I did it and didn't get paid, so I can still do it and get paid.
Wow.
I mean, and it's wonderful. You know, you really, how can you parlay those two together? Yeah. But it is, you really, there are great groups out there. I work with some wonderful nonprofits, some wonderful shelters, and to see, I get their newsletters all the time and see their positive stories, and it's a way to still maybe step back from doing the direct services that can be really, really difficult, but still, you know, make a positive change. Because you can get out there and talk the talk all you want, but unless you're going to do something to stand up behind it, it's.
You mean as far as direct services? Or
I mean anything.
Anything, yeah.
You know, it's easy to stand back and complain about, you know, about.
We're giving too much money to aid.
Oh yeah, yeah. But until you're there and you see the faces of the people that you're really having to say no to, that makes all the difference in the world.
Well, good.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't know, in 5 years I might be that lady at the DMV. I don't know.
Well, until then, thank you for doing
Thank you so much.
Work. Yeah.
Wonderful to meet you.